So years ago, I found myself incarcerated and I ended up trying to take my own life. And realistically, the looking back on it now, I realize how much I wanted to take my life because I thought I had nothing more to live for. Because I thought incarceration, no matter how long your sentence is, it feels more like a life sentence. This was the end.
Welcome to the Unconventional Ministry Podcast. I'm Dennis Weens, your host, a Senior Impact Catalyst at Sat7 USA. My guest today is Noah Asher, who is helping people find purpose within their pain and their past through hope, help, and humor. He has written the book, Chaos, Overcoming the Overwhelming. I'm sure all of us have at some time experienced chaos. Chaos is very complex. It's defined as the unpredictable disorder or confusion. Challenging to navigate, represents instability in our lives, uncertainty, and we definitely need a strategy to overcome those overwhelming circumstances. So Noah, I'm glad to have you on the podcast. You're an award-winning author. You're a chaos survivor. So welcome to the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think for our podcast listeners, let's start with what inspired you. You're a chaos survivor. Take us back. What inspired you to write this book, Chaos Overcoming the Overwhelming?
Yeah, so years ago, I found myself incarcerated and I ended up trying to take my own life. And realistically, the looking back on it now, I realize how much I wanted to take my life because I thought I had nothing more to live for. Because I thought incarceration, no matter how long your sentence is, it feels more like a life sentence. This was the end.
Mm-hmm.
And because I felt so hopeless and helpless and most definitely purposeless, I realized in the aftermath of my chaos how important it is to make sure people who are in the midst of their pain feel purpose and don't go to that super dark place of wanting to end everything. And the word chaos, like you mentioned, is disorder, is disruption. And that's why if you ever see the cover of the book, you'll see a bunch of different words that's like raining down upon this umbrella. And it's different words in which chaos takes over our lives. For me, it was incarceration. For some of it's the loss of a loved one. It's illness. It's a divorce. It's rejection, and the list is endless. But for me, writing this book was simply I wanted to make sure that I was the brightest of lights for people in their darkest of pits because I remember how hopeless I felt.
So that sounds like that would be the key thing you'd want podcast listeners to take away, or people that read this book as you look at all the different chapters. What's one message, takeaway message that you want people to understand from reading this book you wrote?
I would say ultimately the goal of this book is to let people know that there is purpose in their pain, but their pain was never their purpose. They
Right.
have so much more to life, and they can overcome their overwhelming. And once they do, it's going from pain to purpose, but then it's going from purpose to platform. It's taking your purpose and help sharing it to the rest of the world, like you're doing with this podcast, for example. It's letting people see it all over the world and help people in the midst of their own pain.
We all, I think, go through different levels of chaos at different times. And maybe we've got some podcast listeners that are really deep into chaos and disruption in their lives. Talk to us a little bit about some strategies. What should they do? How can they get on the path to overcoming that?
Yeah, for me, the turning point was when I accepted that, you know what, I'm going to stop saying, God, why me? And I'm going to start saying, God, use me. That was the biggest setup for from my setback was saying, okay, no longer is it going to be this Eeyore syndrome sort of mindset where I'm walking around like Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh, and I'm thinking the cloud's always over me. This is the end. This is just how my life is. I refused to accept that in the end. And I realized, you know what? I'm going to find the purpose in my pain and I'm going to fight for it. And so ultimately, I would start with going, okay, I'm going to stop saying, God, why me? I'm going to start saying, God, use me.
And so at that point, you knew God, but you really weren't walking with Him. And that
Yeah.
was kind of a pivotal time in your life where you begin to get serious about your relationship with God?
Yeah, I actually saw a quote the other day that says, it doesn't matter how many hymns you know if you don't know him. And I love that. I was like, oh, that was such my life because I knew who God was, but I didn't have a relationship with him. And because of that, it was even while when I was first locked up, it was sitting around going, okay, well, again, I know who God is, and I know that he's our father, and I know he loves me. So I almost manipulated it in a way, like crying out to God, like, God, if you love me, you'll take my life because you don't want me to be in this pain. And when he didn't, I got so angry with him. And so I started taking things into my own hands. And obviously that didn't work either because here I am. And I got mad with myself that I was like, wow, I can't even do this right. But reality is it all goes back to knowing more is more than just knowing the Father, is having a relationship with him and growing with him, and who he says he is, and then who he says we are.
So during this time of incarceration, were there ministries taking place in the prison? Was there churches that would come in and do services that you had access to? Or was this something that this pivotal time in your life happened on your own?
It was a little bit of both. I'm definitely thankful for the people who came in and did these services. I would say ultimately some of these guys they would come in and there's no offense to them. I love them and I'm so thankful that they would take their time to come into these places. But for me it was they would tell me I'm going to get through this, but they didn't have a story to back it up. That wasn't part of their own personal testimony. And I just remember like thinking to myself, am I going to get through this? Like, how do you know? Show me. That's one thing I'm so thankful for being back and helping with prison ministry and helping with rehab centers and just giving a message of hope to these places. I love that I can share and say, hey, I know that you can get through this because I've gotten through it.
You've walked the talk.
Exactly. And so I love that moment for sure. And then the other thing I did a lot of while I was locked up was reading. I read nonfiction and fiction, and sometimes the fiction books were to just take myself in my mind out of the prison walls and go to a new world. But then also too, I read a lot of nonfiction, and I realized that some were self-help, some were literally like a biography on Abraham Lincoln. I tried to learn and grow while I was there. I wanted to use my time wisely, and but through that reading, I realized I wanted these books help me, and I want to write something that specifically helps people who feel as if their life is in chaos.
So that led, once you got out of incarceration, that led to you writing this book, Chaos Overcoming the Overwhelming, kind of like your own story and how you got through it and you overcame the overwhelming. So talk to us about your book.
Yeah, so I do share a little some of my story throughout the book, just in pieces here and there, because again, I want to make sure people know that it's written with authority. Like I know God can do this because I've seen him do it in my own life, but I don't want any listener listening to this podcast to think that it's an autobiography because no one wants to read a book about me. And so I didn't want to just make it a memoir, but I wanted to include my story for that reason. But throughout the book, you're going to see in every chapter, my team and I have prayed over every page that people would feel hope, help, and humor on every page. And so I wanted to make sure I dug in and said, hey, you'll get through this. That's the hope part. And then go, well, how? That's the help part. And I wanted to really make sure that that was felt on every page. And so chaos goes through three different parts. The first part of the book is prepare, and we know storms and battles are going to come in our life and how we prepare for that. It's chapters about the great I am and how we know if we know who God is, it makes the storm a little bit easier to face. And then the second section of the book is in the midst, and it's how do we walk through the storm victoriously onto the other side. And then the third section is the aftermath, and the tagline is it's all about rebuilding. And I would say that once the storm dissipates, the enemy retreats. A lot of times we're left to rebuild. The storm has left rubble in its in its wake. And so it's all about how do we do that? And this book for people who have ever felt rejected, who have ever felt grief through loss. This book is a great read in my opinion. I know that may be biased, but it's a great book in my opinion to help people make sure that they feel like my life is overwhelmed, but now I can be an overcomer.
I've been on your website, and there's more resources there, not just the book or the book's availability, but beyond the book, there's a lot of resources that you're providing. So give us your website and tell us a little bit about the resources people can find on that website.
Yeah, so if you go to thenoahasher.com, you'll find resources. You'll find first some links on where you can buy the book, like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Walmart. But you'll also be able to find some interviews like this one and some other interviews and articles I've done, as well as our team just launched new author services to help other Christian artists and our authors market their material, which we're very excited about. I say it this way: is I want to help build the authors platform, so all they have to do is stand on it and share their message. And so we're doing things like that to help these authors, and we are also we work with their social medias, and we also work with their website design. And so that's what you'll find on the website. We're also getting ready to launch some more on the website for specific material for people to dive in even deeper into chaos.
And you're also working on a new Senate bill with the state senators of Georgia. So that sounds pretty interesting. Tell us a little bit about that and what you're trying to get through and approved by the Senate.
Yeah, I would say I do want to preface with saying that Genesis 50:20 was such a crucial verse for me. It says at the end of Joseph's life, through all of his chaos that he went through, he says, "What the enemy intended for evil, God used for good to save many." And those three words about to save many were so impactful in my life where I realized, okay, God's not only going to turn things around for me, he's going to turn things around so I can help others. And that is why I'm working with the state Senate right now in Georgia, that we believe it's not just going to be a Georgia thing. It's going to be a state, it has to be a state by state decision, but we believe more and more states are going to pick this up. But we're fighting for everyone to do the last 12 months of their sentence in a halfway house or a transitional center, which means these guys who have been locked up for 40 years or for 4 years, they'll be able to go to this place and not only get the steps they needed to help them get out properly, they'll also be able to get a job and start building that money up. So when they get out, they have a fighting chance. I believe, so many people talk about how they want to fix recidivism. Well, you fix recidivism by fixing rehabilitation and fixing our reentry services. And so this is going to be a major step forward.
And that information is on your website as well?
Yes.
Very good. And go to the website, thenoahasher.com. And from there, you can pick up the book, order the book, Chaos, Overcoming the Overwhelming. It's on, I noticed, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, and many other places to get your books as well. So, Noah, this has been fascinating to hear your story and what God has allowed to come into your life and how you've used it for ministry now and reaching out to others that are incarcerated and helping them overcome the overwhelming in their lives. So thank you for joining the Unconventional Ministry podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for all that you're doing, sharing the messages of so many different people and their stories.
This is the Unconventional Ministry podcast. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your friends and leave a comment. Sat7 is a Middle East and North Africa broadcast media ministry making God's love visible and the gospel available to everyone in the Middle East and North Africa. Sat7 USA has resources in helping you honor God while protecting your family. You can avoid another regret, which is the failure of not creating an estate plan. Through a partnership with Financial Planning Ministry, Sat7 USA provides Christian experts to assist you in preparing your will or trust, all at no financial cost to you. Visit www.sat7usa.org and click on the tab Planned Giving for more information. SAT7 simplifies the process and makes it easy for you so that your family and friends don't have to bear the burden and regret of your failure to create an estate plan. Thank you again for joining this episode of the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.